This video is all about different styles you can have when you're playing riichi mahjong or different ways to play the game. So one scale is like you could pursue big value hands or just go for the fastest tempi or somewhere in the middle. You could be very defensive or very offensive. You could call a lot or not call very much. You could reach a lot or not reach very much, and there's some other variations you could have. So a good question to ask is, which style is the best? And one of the most surprising things that I've found, just um, with all the things I've experienced, is that you can find strong players of all different styles. So, um, in a lot of ways, that kind of shows that there isn't really a best style, and you can kind of do what you want to do and play how you want to play. And if you just master your own style, you can go really high up. Like I've heard that even the I think there's 13 Tenhoi ranked players, which is the top rank on Tenho, and I think they even have their own different styles and they play a bit differently. So even though it might seem like there's a certain best way to play, I think there's actually a lot of room for adding in your own style and um, certainly like you can be at anywhere on the you can be at any level with whichever style you use. So you could be a low level with your style, or you could improve and get really high up, maybe even to the top. So I'd recommend, instead of trying to force yourself to play a certain style, you should probably just play the style that feels natural to you and then figure out ways that you can do that better. So I'm going to cover some ideas behind that, and I'm not going to go too in depth. And a lot of this, like I have my own style, and that's why I know the best. But um, I do know some about how you could play other styles too. So if you want to chase value in good shapes, sometimes that can be a really good thing to do. And if that's your style, it can be a style that you can make work. And some a big note that you want to know is that it's better to go backwards or to chase specific good shapes or high value hands when there's more turns left. So if it's at the very start of a hand, you can do things that kind of break up your hand and go backwards a good amount just because you'll have more draws. And so it's better to pursue those bigger hands or better shapes when you have more draws. And some types of things you could do are like discarding your edge weights, your like 1, 2, or your 8, 9 weights, and holding on to middle tiles. Like if you have more draws, it's even better to do that. You can keep open different types of Yaku chances like Sanshoku, or you can keep tiles near the Dora that you can't use currently but might help you use the Dora. And you're going to want to know your Yaku to be able to keep those Yaku chances open. And so playing like that can be a good way to play, and you can be very successful in that style. You just have to know how to do it. And it can be higher risk sometimes because you'll be holding on to more middle tiles and tiles that might be dangerous. And you should really stop chasing improvements after a certain point. Where that point is, I can't really say for sure, and you could probably find guidelines for it from someone. But as an example, in this hand, this 4 isn't doing anything for making a hand, so if you're a defensive player, you would look at it and you would just discard the 4 because it's not helping you make your hand, and this red dragon is probably safe. It depends on the situation, but most of the time it'll be safe, so you'll discard this 4. But if you're a high value player, you might be looking at Sanshoku, so if you draw the 6 of characters, then you could get a 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6. If you draw the 3 of circles, you could get go for 3-4-5, 3-4-5, 3-4-5. So actually, if you're chasing a high value hand, there is value in holding that four of circles, and you might discard the red dragon. But again, it's gonna depend a lot on like different factors, like how many turns are left. So if it's near the getting later in the game, you might want to discard the four just to be safer, and because you'll have less draws, so you'll have less chances to improve. But if it's at the very start, you might want to just hold on to that. And something else you want to know is that you want to know your efficiency ideas so that you don't chase improvements in the wrong way. This is like kind of an example of that because in this a lot of people do is like they'll see one Yaku like Tan Yao, which is all middle tiles, no ones or nines, and then they'll say, well, I wanted Tan Yao, so I discarded every 1 and 9 in my hand. But sometimes, like in this example hand, this 2 of circles really isn't doing anything for your hand. It's not going to help you at all. So, and this 9 goes with the 8, so you should actually discard the 2 of circles before you discard the 9, because if you draw the 7 of circles, you're going to get a good weight tempai, and it might be a hand that you just declare reach on, and you could win that hand. So, even if you're trying to chase high value hands in good shapes, you still want to know how can you do it better and make sure you're not missing out on things. Now, I'll talk some about defensive play. I think defensive play was really my strong point, and I was very good at not getting last, and I would play super defensive, and it worked out for me. But I know a lot of people who didn't play like that, and it also worked for them. So if you're a defensive player, you can use a lot of sakigiri, which is discarding dangerous tiles that could be kind of useful to you, but they're also dangerous to other people. You could discard those tiles early, but you have to know when to do that. And then you can also make sure you hold safe tiles, especially when your hand isn't that good. So um, you'll want to hold on to at least one safe tile a lot of times, just so if someone declares reach out of the blue, you'll always have something that's safe and or probably safe. Sometimes you can't get safe tiles, get 100% safe tiles. And then when your hands don't look that good or they don't look that valuable, you can play extra safe and discard tiles that are like kind of useful, like edge tiles like 1s and 9s and sometimes lone 2s and 8s. You can discard tiles like that to hold on to safe tiles and also just hold some tiles that could lead up to a big hand. So if you had a hand like this, um, I didn't go over this example, but if you had a hand like this, um, you might start out by discarding this 2 of bamboo, where even though you could draw a good weight around it and it could be a useful tile, your hand doesn't look that good and it looks kind of hard to complete. So you don't necessarily have to just hold every useful tile. You can kind of play it safe, but hold on to like tiles that could make your hand work out and could give you a big value hand. So like you might discard that 2 of bamboo. Sometimes depending on what you draw, you could discard the 8 and 9 of circles. And this is even before these useless honor tiles. And sometimes you can discard the 2 and 1 of characters, also depending on what you draw. And you could do all of that while holding safe tiles, just because if you happen to draw a big hand, it's probably going to be with the middle tiles, or if you draw good weights, it's going to be around the middle tiles. Now going back to this other example, um, and sometimes when you have a hand like this, even though clearly the most efficient play is just to discard the west wind, because then you'll have your perfect Ishanten, where you have your 2, two-sided weights and then two pairs. Um, Sometimes you might want to discard this three of circles because it might be a dangerous tile. That's one reason. It can also trick other people into thinking you don't have anything around the three of circles. That's another reason. But in terms of defensive play, like this three of circles is useful to you, but you might discard it early and then hold on to a safe tile. So that is something you can think about. Now, some notes on defensive play is um, you really have to watch out for overfolding. So something I have seen defensive players do that I don't think is good is that they'll sometimes fold too early, like they'll just kind of feel uneasy, so they'll start discarding their safe tiles and kind of breaking up their hand and playing safe. And that has like multiple big problems where if you're doing that too early, you're going to use up all your safe tiles, and then when someone is actually tenpai and someone's actually going to win, then you're not going to have any safe tiles left. And then the other thing is, winning is one of the best ways to avoid dealing in. So, because if all you do is not deal in, you're going to lose points unless someone else deals in for you. But if you don't deal in and you don't win, you're probably losing points. So, really, if you have the chance to win, then winning is pretty much the best way to not deal in. So, if you fold too early when you have a hand that has a chance to win, not only are you letting other people have a better chance to win, you're also increasing your chance to deal into them because you're like getting rid of your save tiles too early. So that can be a big problem. And then the next thing is you want to make sure you don't destroy your hand. So you might have a hand like this. This five of circles has nothing connected to it. So you might be thinking about being a defensive player and using Sakigiri. So you're like, this five has nothing connected to it, and you just discard it, and you hold on to safe tiles. But that's kind of like giving up your hand because you don't have enough blocks. So if these wins are out, or even if they aren't, they're hard to make a meld with. You have this meld and this meld. That's two melds, and then a pair, and then a draw for a meld. So you can see three melds and a pair, but that means you need one more meld somewhere. And your best candidates are going to be those middle tiles, like a middle five. So even though it has nothing connected to it right now, it's your best candidate for another meld. So you definitely don't want to discard it, and you want to make a meld around it. So even if you want to be a defensive player, you do need to know how to do so correctly and not overfold and not discard tiles that are really useful to you that prevent you from winning, essentially, when you discard them. Another note about discarding the five of circles here is if you draw anything around it, like a 3, 4, 6, 7, you're putting yourself at risk of free 10. So then those tiles also become harder to use, and you have to hope to draw something somewhere else. Now for aggressive play, this is a style that I'm not very comfortable with, but I can talk about things that other people mention or that I've seen other people do as well. So one thing I've noticed a lot is that some strong players tend to take more risk early on in a match. So if it's East-1 in an East-South match, sometimes people will just push like not Tsuji Dora tiles on the first turn against a reach, and it might be a Diller reach. And it kind of looks crazy to a defensive player, like you can't do that, but some people do that, and they're still very high rated players. So I think it is a big note that the early in a match gives you more time to make up points if you happen to deal in. And as it gets later on, you kind of have to play more according to the situation and take smaller risks. You can also hold a lot of dangerous tiles that could be useful. So it's like the opposite of the defensive play where you discard the dangerous tiles. You can also hold them if it's early on and then only start discarding them as it gets a lot later on. And then even if someone just declares reach, you can be more incentivized to push if your hand is valuable or if it's close to tenpai or tenpai. One thing I didn't put here is like if you have good weights or good shapes, and then fewer safe suji. So suji are the tiles that are 3 apart, like a 1 and 4 is a suji, or a 2 5, or 3 6, 4 7, 5 8, and 6 9. So if someone discards a 5, then the 2 5 suji is safe, and the 5 8 suji is safe, or suji at least. Like, so if someone discards the 5, 2, and 8 are suji. So if there's fewer safe suji, then you have more incentive to push because it's less likely for the tile you discard to deal in. And then it's going to be hard to find the right balance. And I have a note here that if you're with like evenly skilled players, you should win less than 25% of your hands on average. And there's not that much you can do to change that, even if you play really aggressive. So you have to find the right balance and not try to win every hand, especially the ones that aren't really high chance to win. If you want to call a lot, there's some things to think about. So in general, calling is usually faster, so if you want to win quickly, you should make calls if they allow you to win. And you can call in advance, so it's called Otozuke, where you call without your Yaku yet, and then you need. So here's an example hand for that. Maybe someone discards the 8 of circles. Well, if you want to win fast, you should probably call it, even though it reveals a 7, 8, 9. So it's going to be Otozuke, where you don't actually have a Yaku yet, you're waiting to get it, and in this case, it's the white dragons. So it's going to be Otozuke, and it reveals a 7, 8, 9, and people might be able to predict that you're waiting on some Yaku high, like white dragons. But even then, a lot of times, if you want to win quickly, you should still make the call. So if you're a call heavy player, that's something you would want to know. You make that call because someone's going to have to discard the white dragons eventually, unless they also have a pair of it. And then if they don't, like most people will, but if they don't, then they're probably like giving up their own hand. So there's a trade-off there. Then there's some special calls too, like if someone declares reach, then you might call their reach tile just so that they can't get Ipatsu. And usually you would only do that if you have a lot of other safe tiles as well. So you're not putting yourself at risk, but you're decreasing the reach player's potential value because they can't get Ipatsu anymore, which is winning on the first turn. Sometimes you call to change the last draw, like if you can skip someone who's declared reach, or you can deny them the last draw, like you change the draw order so that they don't draw the last tile, then you can either deny them a chance to win, or you can deny them a chance at higher value because of the Yaku for winning on the last draw. Sometimes you can make calls like just call a Dora triplet even when you don't actually have a hand, just to like bluff and kind of affect how other people play. And there's a lot that goes into that, but I'm not going to cover all of that here. Now, if you make calls, you tend to lose value, and it can be more risky because you have less tiles in your hand. So you have less tiles to choose from if you're going to defend against someone. Then this is just an example hand, but this came from a book, and they recommend calling the 3 of characters or the 7 of characters so that you can get Tan Yao, which for a lot of people who don't call that much, that probably looks kind of crazy, but that's what they recommend. And they also recommend calling the 5 of characters or the 5 of circles so you can get Sanshoku. And that also looks pretty unnatural if that's not what you normally do, but there's a lot of, like, you can make a lot of strange calls and be a very strong player still. Or you could not make those calls and still be a very strong player. Yeah, you could Dama a lot, which is not declaring reach when you're in Tenpai. So if your hand already has a Yaku, then you don't necessarily have to reach. Not declaring reach loses out on some potential value, but in certain score situations and round situations, that might be fine, and you might not want to reach. In certain specific situations, you can reach you can not reach so that you'll be able to fold. But again, winning is essentially the best way to avoid dealing in, so that's something that you want to be careful about. Like, you don't want to be missing out on wins so that you can fold and lose less points. So most of the time you're going to want to give yourself the best chance to win, and if you don't have a Yaku, that might be by declaring reach. And you can also not reach hands that are guaranteed to be a certain value, like a guaranteed Mangan, guaranteed Hanuman, or guaranteed higher value hand. You don't necessarily have to reach those hands because they're already high value, and you might just want to make sure you win the hand. Over here is an example of a point situation where you might not reach so that you could be able to fold. So if the person in first was the dealer and it's near the end of the game and they're like way ahead of you, and then your second and third and fourth are way behind you, then you might not reach even if you're 10 pi on a good weight, just because, like, if you don't have a really big value hand, it's kind of not worth winning, essentially. It's okay to lose points to, like, not being 10 pi. You just don't want to deal into, like, a dealer Mangan or something like that. So, in a situation like that, you might not want to reach, and then if anyone else does something, you might fold. And you're not going to lose too much in a like that's probably a good way to play a situation like that. But this is a very specific situation, and I do want to emphasize still that most of the time winning is the best way to not deal in. And then that's only when you have a hand that has a good chance at winning though. And if someone's already declared reach and you're farther away from winning, then it's unlikely that you'll win. So in those situations, you generally want to fold. Now, if you don't reach, you're probably going to be losing a lot of value because reach gives you an extra Yaku and a chance at a lot of bonuses like Uradora and Ipatsu. So if you don't reach, you're missing out on all of that. You might miss a win if you don't have a Yaku, so that's why if you don't have a Yaku, a lot of the times you should reach, unless you're like trying to improve your hand, but that can be iffy sometimes. Then if you don't reach, other people might not fold, which in some cases is a good thing because they might just deal in, but in some cases it's a bad thing because they might catch up to you because they didn't fold and then they end up winning. So it's a trade-off. And on the other side, you could be very reach heavy, and something a lot of people do is that even if they have a guaranteed high value hand, if it's early and it's on a good weight, they'll reach it anyway. So it's like a guaranteed mahjong. They might still reach if it's early on and it's on a good weight. And most of the time, just declaring reach is going to be a fine thing to do. It's not going to be too bad, and it's more of a risk to not declare reach a lot of the times. Like that's more likely to be a mistake. And then you can also reach Dora weights, like um, if you think it's unlikely for someone to discard the tile, even if you Dama, then then it might be better to just declare reach and give yourself more chances to draw that tile. Now, um, something to talk about with regards to efficiency is I think when I say efficiency, a lot of people think of it as an absolute rule, like when you're playing Mahjong, you should choose the discard that maximizes your chance to make a hand every time, and if you don't do that, you're a bad player. But I think the way that you should think of it is it's more like a tool. So you use efficiency to achieve the goal that you want to achieve, or you use it to help you to play the style that you want to play better. So one thing you can do with it is maximize your chance to make any hand, but you can also maximize your chance to make a good shape hand or a high value hand. So you can play that style, like you can maybe decrease your chance to make any hand, but increase your chance to make a high value hand or a reach hand, a hand that you can declare reach with, or a hand that you don't have to declare reach with. You can use your knowledge of efficiency to minimize your risk if you're a defensive player. So you can do that Sakigiri. You can discard those dangerous tiles early without hurting your win chance too much. And it can also help you recognize if calling a tile will actually speed up your hand and is worth doing. So I really want to emphasize that you should use it more as a tool, not as an absolute rule that you just always discard the most efficient. You always do the most efficient numbers discard every time, and that makes you good. It's more like you should try to understand it so that you can use it to do what you want to do and play the style you want to play. So I would say try and master your own style and um, try to figure out like the type of play that feels natural to you, and then just do it better. Figure out how you can do it even better, and if you do that, you can become good even while playing your own style. And the story I have about that is so after I joined groups, like when I got to seven dan, I essentially just played on my own. I like did almost everything on my own, just figured everything out on my own. So then I really developed my own style. But then when I joined different groups, I found out that they kind of played a lot differently than I did. And some of those people were still pretty good themselves. So um, then it was kind of like, I kind of felt like maybe I should play more how they play. Maybe I should play more aggressively. And I tried it, and I actually um, played a lot worse, and I went down a lot and lost a couple ranks and stuff, or I lost a rank and whatever. And then it's like it just didn't really work out for me. So um, sometimes it's good to try different things, different styles, and pull in ideas that you're not used to. But at the same time, sometimes it's good to just figure out how you like to play and really hone that skill and really get better at that. So there's a bit of a balance there, but you don't necessarily have to play in the same way that everyone else plays in mahjong, and you can still be good. So that's the end of this video.